The flames licked the night sky, hungry and merciless as they consumed the only home Zara Valenti had ever known. Colorado Territory, 1875, a time when a woman's world could burn to ash in moments, leaving her with nothing but the thin cotton nightgown on her back and the acrid taste of smoke in her lungs. Zara stumbled away from the homestead, her bare feet bloodied by the rocky terrain. The cool spring night air bit at her skin, raising goosebumps across her shoulders and down her arms. Behind her, the crackling inferno devoured the last of her family's possessions, her father's books, her mother's china, and every memory they'd built over the past 5 years since settling in Colfax, Colorado. The smoke stung her eyes, blurring her vision as she pressed forward into the darkness. Her dark hair, usually neatly pinned, cascaded in wild waves down her back. At 22, she had never felt so utterly alone. The Homestead attack had come without warning, men with covered faces, torches, and guns. Her father had pushed her through the back window before the shots rang out. The sound still echoed in her ears. "Run, Zara." Those were his final words. So she ran, barefoot and barely clothed, into the vast emptiness of the Colorado wilderness. Each breath burned in her chest, each step sent jolts of pain through her feet. The moonlight cast eerie shadows across the landscape, transforming familiar terrain into something alien and threatening. A mile from the homestead, her legs finally gave way. She collapsed by a cluster of boulders, drawing her knees to her chest as sobs racked her body. The thin cotton nightgown offered no protection against the night's chill, and soon her teeth chattered uncontrollably. "Please," she whispered to no one, "please help me." As if in answer to her desperate prayer, the sound of hoofbeats cut through the night. Zara's heart leapt to her throat. Friend or foe? In the Wild West, that distinction often meant the difference between life and death. She pressed herself against the rocks, trying to make herself invisible in the shadows. The rider approached slowly, the silhouette of man and horse outlined against the midnight sky. The horse nickered softly as its rider pulled it to a stop. "Hello," a deep voice called out. "Is someone there?" Zara remained silent, trembling from cold and fear. "I saw the fire," the man continued. "If anyone's out there, I mean no harm." Something in his voice, a gentleness, perhaps gave Zara the courage to speak. "Here," she called, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm here." The rider dismounted with fluid grace and approached cautiously. As he drew closer, Zara could make out his features in the moonlight, tall and broad-shouldered, with a strong jaw shadowed by stubble. A cowboy's hat sat atop his head, and a bandana hung loose around his neck. "Good Lord," he breathed when he saw her huddled form. Without hesitation, he shrugged off his long duster coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. The warmth of it, still carrying his body heat, was immediate and enveloping. The scent of leather, horses, and something uniquely masculine surrounded her. "My name's Jake Ryder," he said, crouching before her. "I work at the Carson Ranch just over that ridge. I saw the fire and rode out to help." "Zara," she managed through chattering teeth. "Zara Valenti. The Valenti Homestead." Recognition flashed in his eyes. "What happened?" "Men came," she whispered, the horror still fresh, "with torches and guns. My father, her voice broke as reality crashed over her. "They're gone. They're all gone." Jake's face hardened, his jaw clenching as he glanced back toward the orange glow still visible on the horizon. "Can you stand, Miss Valenti? We need to get you somewhere safe." When she tried to rise, her legs betrayed her again. Without a word, Jake scooped her into his arms, lifting her as if she weighed nothing. His coat enveloped her like a protective shield as he carried her to his horse. "I'm going to put you up on Samson here, and then I'll climb up behind you," he explained. "That all right with you, Miss Valenti?" She nodded numbly, too exhausted and traumatized to do anything but accept his help. With gentle hands, he lifted her onto the saddle, then mounted behind her. One strong arm circled her waist, steadying her as he gathered the reins with his other hand. "Carson Ranch is closest," he said, his breath warm against her ear. "Mrs. Carson will take good care of you. She's a fine woman with a kind heart." As they rode through the night, Zara leaned back against Jake's solid chest, drawing strength from his presence. His coat smelled of prairie grass and wood smoke, comforting scents that reminded her of simpler times. The gentle rhythm of the horse beneath them and the steady beat of Jake's heart against her back lulled her into a strange calm despite the horror she'd just witnessed. "My parents," she murmured, half delirious with exhaustion and grief. "I should have stayed. I should have helped them." "You'd be dead too," Jake said, his voice low but firm. "Your father saved your life by making you run." The truth of his words pierced her heart. She was alive because her father had sacrificed himself. The weight of that knowledge was almost too much to bear. "Why?" she asked. "Why would anyone do this?" Jake was silent for a long moment. "The West is still wild, Miss Valenti. Some men take what they want by force, but I promise you this: whoever did this won't get away with it. Sheriff Miller is a good man. He'll see justice done." The Carson Ranch appeared as they crested a hill, a sprawling main house with several outbuildings, lanterns still glowing in windows despite the late hour. As they approached, a door swung open and a woman stepped onto the porch, shotgun in hand. "Who goes there?" she called out. "It's Jake Ryder, Mrs. Carson," Jake answered. "I've found someone who needs help." The woman lowered her weapon as they drew closer. "Good heavens, Jake, what have you gotten yourself into now?" "This is Miss Zara Valenti," Jake explained as he dismounted and then carefully helped Zara down. "Her homestead was attacked tonight." Mrs. Carson's face softened immediately. She was a handsome woman in her 50s, with silver streaking her dark hair and kind eyes that had seen their share of hardship. "You poor thing. Come inside, quickly now." Jake kept his arm around Zara's waist, supporting her as they followed Mrs. Carson into the warmth of the ranch house. The interior was simple but comfortable: polished wood floors, sturdy furniture, and a large fireplace where embers still glowed. "Robert," Mrs. Carson called. "Robert, come down here." Heavy footsteps sounded on the stairs, and a moment later a tall, gray-haired man appeared. "What's all the commotion, Martha?" His eyes widened as he took in the scene before him. "Jake, what's happened?" "The Valenti homestead was attacked tonight, sir," Jake explained. "Miss Valenti here escaped, but I believe her family didn't make it." Robert Carson's face darkened. "Damn cowards. Martha, get the girl some clothes and something hot to drink. Jake, ride into town and fetch the sheriff. He needs to hear about this directly." "No." The word burst from Zara's lips with unexpected force. "Please don't leave me." Her fingers clutched at Jake's shirt, desperate and pleading. The thought of being separated from her rescuer sent waves of panic through her body. Jake looked to Mr. Carson, uncertainty in his eyes. "It's all right, son," the older man said with understanding. "The sheriff can wait till morning. The poor girl's been through enough tonight." Mrs. Carson approached with a gentle smile. "Come with me, dear. Let's get you cleaned up and into some proper clothes. I'll make you some tea with honey to help calm your nerves." Reluctantly, Zara released her grip on Jake's shirt. He gave her an encouraging nod. "I'll be right here when you're done. You're safe now, Miss Valenti, I promise." Mrs. Carson led Zara upstairs to a small but tidy bedroom. With motherly efficiency, she helped Zara wash the soot and tears from her face, cleaned and bandaged her cut feet, and provided her with a simple cotton nightgown and a woolen robe. "You're about the same size as my daughter was," Mrs. Carson explained as she helped Zara into the clean clothes. She moved to Denver last year with her husband. Thank you, Zara whispered, the kindness of these strangers bringing fresh tears to her eyes. I have nothing to repay you with. Everything is gone. Hush now, Mrs. Carson soothed, patting her hand. That's not how things work out here. We help each other because that's what decent folks do. She brushed Zara's tangled hair with gentle strokes. Jake was fortunate to find you when he did. He's a good man, one of the best cowboys we've ever had working for us. Downstairs, Jake paced the floor while Robert Carson poured 2 glasses of whiskey. Here, son. Looks like you could use this. Jake accepted the glass with a nod of thanks. It was bad, Mr. Carson. The whole place was engulfed when I got there. I didn't even know if anyone had survived until I spotted her hiding by those rocks on Miller's Ridge. Any idea who would do such a thing? Jake took a sip of whiskey, welcoming the burn. Could be several possibilities. The Valenti's land borders Blackwell's property. He's been trying to expand his cattle operation. Thomas Blackwell, Carson's expression hardened. He's ambitious, but I can't see him resorting to murder. What about the new mining company? Jake suggested. There's been talk they found silver in these parts. The Valenti's might have been sitting on valuable land. Before Carson could respond, Mrs. Carson returned with Zara. Jake's breath caught at the sight of her. Clean and dressed in proper clothes, her natural beauty shone through despite the sorrow etched on her face. Her dark hair fell in waves past her shoulders, and her eyes, a deep brown, held a vulnerability that stirred something protective in his chest. Miss Valenti, he said, standing straighter. How are you feeling? Better, thank you, she replied softly. And please call me Zara. Mrs. Carson guided her to a chair by the fire and pressed a steaming mug of tea into her hands. Drink this, dear. It will help you sleep. I don't think I can sleep, Zara admitted, her hands trembling slightly as she accepted the mug. Every time I close my eyes, I see the flames. I hear the gunshots. Jake moved to sit in the chair opposite her. I know it's hard, but try to tell us what happened. Any detail might help us find who did this. Zara took a deep breath, the steam from the tea warming her face. We were preparing for bed. My mother was reading and my father was looking over some papers. Then we heard horses approaching. My father went to the window and she paused, steadying herself. His face changed. He grabbed his rifle and told my mother to hide me. Before we could do anything, something came crashing through the window. A torch, I think. The curtains caught fire immediately. Jake nodded encouragingly, his expression grave but gentle. There were shouts outside. My father pushed me toward the back room and told me to escape through the window. My mother. Her voice broke. My mother kissed me goodbye. She knew. They both knew they wouldn't make it out. Tears slid down her cheeks. As I climbed out the window, I heard gunshots. I ran as fast as I could. Did you see any of the men? Robert Carson asked. Anything that might identify them? Zara closed her eyes, trying to remember. They wore bandanas over their faces, but one of them, the leader, I think had a distinctive voice. Deep with a slight accent, southern maybe. Jake and Mr. Carson exchanged a meaningful glance. Anything else? Jake pressed gently. Horses, clothing. One of the horses was white with black spots. A pinto, I think you call it, and she frowned, concentrating. The leader wore a silver ring. I saw it catch the firelight when they were setting the torch. Jake nodded. That's good, Zara, very good. Those details will help the sheriff. Mrs. Carson placed a comforting hand on Zara's shoulder. That's enough for tonight. The poor girl needs rest. Of course, Mr. Carson agreed, rising from his chair. You'll stay here as long as you need, Miss Valenti. Consider yourself at home. Thank you, Zara whispered, overwhelmed by their kindness. I'll ride into town at first light, Jake said, finishing his whiskey. Sheriff Miller needs to know about this right away. Where will you sleep tonight? Zara asked, suddenly anxious at the thought of him leaving. Jake has a room in the bunkhouse with the other hands, Mrs. Carson explained. Just a stone's throw from the main house. Zara nodded, relieved he would be nearby. As if reading her thoughts, Jake gave her a reassuring smile. I'll be close if you need anything, he promised. And tomorrow, after I speak with the sheriff, I'll take you back to your homestead if you're ready to see if anything can be salvaged. The thought made Zara's stomach clench, but she knew it was necessary. Thank you, Jake, for everything. As Mrs. Carson showed Zara to her room for the night, Jake stepped onto the porch, breathing in the cool night air. The glow of the distant fire had diminished to a faint orange smudge on the horizon. Anger burned in his chest, along with something else, a fierce determination to protect the young woman who had lost everything tonight. He couldn't explain the immediate connection he felt to Zara Valenti. Perhaps it was the vulnerability in her eyes, or the courage she'd shown in the face of unimaginable horror. Whatever it was, he knew with certainty that his life had changed the moment he wrapped his coat around her trembling shoulders. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through unfamiliar curtains. For a blissful moment, Zara existed in the space between sleep and wakefulness, untouched by memory. Then reality crashed over her like a wave, and she bolted upright, a scream lodged in her throat. The bedroom door opened and Mrs. Carson appeared with a tray. I thought you might be awake. I've brought you some breakfast. Zara pushed her hair from her face, forcing herself to breathe normally. What time is it? Just past 7. Jake rode out to town about an hour ago to speak with Sheriff Miller. He said to tell you he'll be back before midday. Mrs. Carson set the tray laden with scrambled eggs, bacon, and biscuits on the bedside table. Eat. You'll need your strength. Though her appetite was non-existent, Zara forced herself to eat, knowing Mrs. Carson was right. As she ate, Mrs. Carson laid out a simple day dress, stockings, and boots. These were my daughter's, she explained. She won't miss them and you'll need proper clothes. You've been so kind, Zara said. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. Mrs. Carson waved away her words. Family friends of ours lost everything in a fire when I was about your age. Strangers took us in, fed us, clothed us. This is how we survive out here, by helping each other through the hard times. After dressing, Zara made her way downstairs. Mr. Carson was at the table, reading a newspaper. He looked up as she entered, his weathered face softening with sympathy. Morning, Miss Valenti. Did you manage to get any sleep? Some, Zara admitted. Thank you for your hospitality, Mr. Carson. Robert, please, he insisted. And it's no trouble, I've known your father for years. Good man, Edward Valenti, smart, hardworking. He shook his head sadly. This country's supposed to be civilized now, but sometimes I wonder. Zara sank into a chair, grateful for the chance to hear someone speak kindly of her father. Did you know him well? Well enough. He came to me for advice when he first arrived in Colfax. Wanted to know the best crops for this soil. Robert smiled at the memory. Stubborn man, your father, determined to make that land work. And he did, Zara said softly. The wheat was just beginning to show. This would have been our best harvest yet. A heavy silence fell between them, broken only when the door opened and Jake strode in, his expression grim. He removed his hat as he entered, revealing tousled brown hair. Sheriff Miller's gathering a posse, he announced without preamble. He's talking to men in town now. They'll be ready to ride within the hour. Did you tell him about the pinto horse and the silver ring? Zara asked. Jake nodded, his eyes meeting hers. I did. He thinks it might be Harlan Doyle and his gang. They've been causing trouble up and down the Front Range for months now. Rustling cattle, robbing stagecoaches. But why target my family's homestead? Zara asked, confusion and anger mingling in her voice. "We had little of value." "That's what we need to find out," Jake said, his voice gentle but determined. "Are you ready to ride out to the homestead?" "We don't have to go if you're not up for it." Zara squared her shoulders. "I need to see it. I need to know if anything, if anyone." She couldn't finish the sentence. Jake understood. "I'll saddle a horse for you. Mr. Carson, would it be all right if we borrowed your buckboard as well? In case there's anything to salvage." "Of course," Robert agreed. "Take what you need." Within the hour, Zara found herself riding beside Jake, headed back toward the place she'd fled in terror just hours before. Mrs. Carson had packed them a small lunch and insisted Zara take a carpet bag with additional clothing. The woman's kindness threatened to unravel Zara's carefully maintained composure. "You all right?" Jake asked, noting her silence. "No," she admitted honestly, "but I will be." He nodded, respecting her candor. "That's all any of us can do after tragedy. Just keep going until one day we realize we're all right again." Something in his tone made Zara glance at him curiously. "You sound like you speak from experience." A shadow crossed his face. "Lost my parents and younger sister to cholera when I was 17. One week they were healthy, the next they were gone." "I'm sorry," Zara said softly. "That must have been devastating." "It was," he acknowledged. "I was angry for a long time. Drifted from ranch to ranch, took whatever work I could find. The Carsons gave me steady employment 3 years ago. They've been good to me. They seem like wonderful people." "The best," Jake agreed. "Robert's teaching me the cattle business from the ground up. Says I've got a good head for it." He smiled slightly. "I've been saving to buy my own spread someday." As they rode, Zara found Jake's presence comforting. There was a quiet strength about him, a steadiness that anchored her amid the chaos of her emotions. He didn't press her to talk, but seemed content to ride beside her in companionable silence, understanding that words were inadequate in the face of such loss. When they crested the final hill, Zara's breath caught painfully in her chest. Where once stood a sturdy 2-story farmhouse now lay a blackened skeleton of charred timber and collapsed walls. Wisps of smoke still rose from the ruins, curling into the clear blue sky. Jake reached across the space between their horses and laid a gentle hand on her arm. "We can turn back." "No," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I need to do this." They approached slowly, the horses' hooves crunching on the gravel drive that her father had so painstakingly constructed. The smell of smoke and something worse, something Zara refused to name, hung heavy in the air. Jake dismounted first, then helped Zara down from her horse. Her legs trembled as she stood before the ruins of her childhood home. Tears blurred her vision, but she blinked them away, determined to face this moment with courage. "The sheriff's men have already been here," Jake observed, pointing to fresh hoofprints in the soft earth. "Look, they've marked something over there." A small wooden cross had been placed a short distance from the house. Zara walked toward it as if in a trance, Jake following close behind. As they neared, she saw that there were actually 2 crosses, side by side. "Your parents," Jake said softly. "The sheriff must have found them and given them a proper burial." Zara sank to her knees before the simple markers. No names, no dates, just 2 wooden crosses to commemorate the lives of Edward and Sophia Valenti. A sob tore from her throat as she reached out to touch the freshly turned earth. "Mama, Papa," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." Jake knelt beside her, his arm coming around her shoulders as she wept. He didn't offer empty platitudes or tell her everything would be all right. He simply held her, lending her his strength as grief shuddered through her body. When her tears finally subsided, he helped her to her feet. "Should we look through the remains? There might be something salvageable." Wiping her face, Zara nodded. Together they approached the ruins cautiously. The structure was still unstable, with portions of the second floor having collapsed into the main level. Jake tested each step before allowing Zara to follow, ever mindful of her safety. In what had been the kitchen, Zara found her mother's cast iron skillet, blackened but intact. "She loved this pan," she said, picking it up reverently. "She brought it all the way from New York when we moved west." Jake placed it carefully in the buckboard. They continued their search, finding a few metal tools, a water-damaged Bible with the family history still legible, and a small metal box containing her mother's wedding ring and a daguerreotype of her parents on their wedding day. "This is all that's left," Zara said, clutching the box to her chest. "Everything else is gone." "Not everything," Jake said gently. "You're still here. Your parents' legacy lives on in you." As they were preparing to leave, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention. Sheriff Miller, a weathered man with a thick mustache, rode at the head of a group of 6 men. "Miss Valenti," he called, tipping his hat respectfully as he dismounted. "I'm sorry for your loss, madam. I knew your father, he was a good man." "Thank you, Sheriff," Zara replied. "Have you found anything? Any sign of who did this?" Sheriff Miller's expression hardened. "We're tracking Doyle's gang. Found their camp about 10 miles east of here, abandoned but recent. They're headed toward the New Mexico territory, but we'll catch them." He turned to Jake. "Ryder, I could use a man of your skills with us. You're one of the best trackers in the county." Jake glanced at Zara, clearly torn. "I can't leave Miss Valenti alone, Sheriff." "She won't be alone," the sheriff assured him. "Mrs. Miller would be happy to have her stay with us in town until this is resolved." Zara felt a surge of panic at the thought of being separated from Jake, the one person who had been her constant support since the attack. Yet she knew the importance of bringing her parents' killers to justice. "You should go," she told Jake, mustering her courage. "Help them find the men who did this." Jake studied her face. "Are you sure?" "Yes," she lied, forcing a smile. "I'll be fine with Mrs. Miller. Just come back safely." Decision made, they returned to town together. Colfax was a small but growing settlement, with a main street lined by a general store, saloon, blacksmith, and the sheriff's office. Mrs. Miller, a plump, friendly woman with graying hair, welcomed Zara warmly into their modest home behind the jail. "You poor dear," she clucked, settling Zara in their spare bedroom. "You'll stay with us as long as you need." As evening fell, Zara stood on the porch watching Jake prepare to ride out with the posse. He approached her, hat in hand, his expression solemn. "We should be back within a week," he said. "Doyle can't have gotten far with a gang that size." Zara nodded, unable to express the tumult of emotions she felt: fear of being left alone, worry for his safety, and a strange, unexpected longing for his presence. "Jake," she began, then faltered, unsure what she wanted to say. He seemed to understand nonetheless. Reaching into his saddlebag, he pulled out his duster coat, the same one he had wrapped around her shoulders the night before. "Keep this," he said, draping it around her. "I'll be back for it." The simple gesture and the promise it contained brought tears to her eyes. "Be careful," she whispered. "I will." His eyes held hers for a long moment, and then, with an impulsive motion, he leaned forward and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. Before she could react, he turned and mounted his horse, joining the waiting posse. Zara stood on the porch long after they'd disappeared from view. The coat wrapped around her shoulders like an embrace, carrying the scent of the man who had saved not just her life, but also her faith in humanity. The next 6 days were among the longest of Zara's life. Mrs. Miller was kindness itself, keeping Zara busy with household tasks and introducing her to the women of Colfax. The town rallied around her with typical frontier generosity. The general store owner offered her credit. The seamstress gifted her with a new dress. and the banker set up a small account with what remained of her father's deposits. Yet through it all, Zara's thoughts returned constantly to Jake. Each day, she found herself watching the horizon, hoping for the return of the posse. Each night, she wrapped herself in his coat before falling into restless sleep, plagued by nightmares of fire and loss. On the seventh day, as Zara was helping Mrs. Miller in the garden, the distant sound of hoofbeats made her heart leap. She straightened, shading her eyes against the afternoon sun as riders appeared on the road into town. "They're back," Mrs. Miller said, setting down her trowel. "Let's go see." Zara's steps quickened as they approached the main street. The posse rode in slowly, dust-covered and weary. Sheriff Miller led the way, his expression grim but satisfied. And there, riding just behind him, was Jake. Relief flooded through Zara at the sight of him, whole and unharmed. He spotted her immediately, his tired face breaking into a warm smile that made her heart flutter strangely in her chest. The men dismounted in front of the sheriff's office. A murmur ran through the gathering crowd as three bound men were led from their horses toward the jail. One of them, a tall man with a cruel face, spat on the ground as he passed Zara. "Valenti's girl," he sneered. "Your pa should have taken the offer. Wouldn't be dead if he had." Jake lunged forward, grabbing the man by his shirt. "Another word, Doyle, and I'll make sure you never speak again." Sheriff Miller intervened. "That's enough, Ryder. Get him inside." As the prisoners were taken into the jail, Jake approached Zara, his expression softening as he took in the sight of her wearing his coat despite the warm day. "You're all right?" she asked, her eyes searching his face for any sign of injury. "I'm fine," he assured her, removing his hat. "Tired and in need of a bath, but unharmed. And you found them the men who killed my parents?" Jake nodded grimly. "Harlan Doyle and two of his gang. The others escaped across the territorial line, but we got the ringleaders. They'll stand trial here in Colfax." "What did he mean about my father taking the offer?" Jake's expression darkened. "Doyle was working for someone, Zara, someone who wanted your family's land. They offered to buy your father out, and when he refused, they burned us out instead," she finished, anger flaring bright and hot in her chest. Who hired them?" "We're not certain yet," Jake admitted. "Doyle's not talking, but the sheriff has suspicions. There's a mining company, Rocky Mountain Silver and Copper, that's been buying up land all through this valley. Your father's homestead sits on what they believe is a rich silver vein." The revelation struck Zara like a physical blow. Her parents had died for silver they didn't even know existed beneath their feet. The injustice of it made her knees weak. Jake must have noticed her distress, for he took her elbow, steadying her. "Come on, let's get you sitting down somewhere." They walked to a small bench outside the general store. As they sat side by side, Zara found herself drawing strength from Jake's solid presence beside her. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "There will be a trial," he explained. "With the evidence we have, Doyle and his men will hang for murder. As for whoever hired them—" His jaw tightened. "Justice might take longer, but it will come." "And what about me?" The question slipped out before she could stop it, vulnerable and uncertain. Jake turned to face her, his expression serious. "What do you want, Zara? Do you have family elsewhere you could go to?" She shook her head. "No one. My parents were all I had." "The Carsons would be happy to have you stay with them," Jake suggested. "Mrs. Carson has already mentioned it. Or you could remain in town. I'm sure Mrs. Miller would welcome your company." Neither option felt right to Zara. The thought of returning to the charred remains of her homestead filled her with dread, yet the idea of imposing indefinitely on either the Carsons or the Millers was equally unpalatable. "I don't know," she admitted. "I've never been on my own before." Jake was silent for a moment, seeming to wrestle with something. Finally, he spoke. "There's another possibility. Your father's land, it's still yours by right. The deed would pass to you as his only living heir. What good is land I can't work? I know nothing about farming without my father's guidance." "You could sell it," Jake suggested. "Likely for a good price if that silver vein is real. It would give you enough money to start fresh somewhere, Denver perhaps, or even back east if you preferred." The thought should have been appealing, a chance to leave behind the scene of so much tragedy. Yet something made Zara hesitate. This was my parents' dream. They worked so hard to make that land productive, to sell it to the very people who might have ordered their deaths. Jake nodded, understanding. "You don't have to decide anything today. Take time to grieve, to think." As evening approached, Zara returned to the miller's home, her mind whirling with possibilities and uncertainties. Jake had promised to call on her the following day after he'd rested. The thought of seeing him again brought an unexpected warmth to her heart, a small spark of something positive amid the darkness of her grief. That night, as she prepared for bed, Zara realized she was still wearing Jake's coat. She should return it to him now that he was back, yet she found herself reluctant to part with it. It had become a talisman of sorts, a physical reminder that not all had been lost that terrible night, that kindness and goodness still existed in the world. She fell asleep with the coat draped across her bed, a tangible connection to the man who had become her unexpected anchor in a sea of tragedy. The following weeks brought a whirlwind of activity to Colfax. The trial of Harlan Doyle and his accomplices proceeded swiftly, with Zara called to testify about the night of the attack. Standing in the makeshift courtroom, the town hall cleared of its usual furniture, she faced her parents' killers with quiet dignity, recounting the horror of that night in a clear, steady voice. Throughout her testimony, she was aware of Jake's presence in the back of the room, his unwavering support giving her the strength to relive her worst memories. When the verdict came down guilty on all counts, with sentences of hanging, Zara felt not triumph but a hollow relief that justice, at least in part, had been served. The question of who had hired Doyle remained unanswered. The men at Rocky Mountain Silver and Copper denied any involvement, and without direct evidence, the sheriff could take no action against them. The company made Zara an offer for her land, a generous sum that would have allowed her to live comfortably anywhere she chose. She refused. "I'm not selling," she told Jake as they walked along Colfax's Main Street one evening. In the weeks since the attack, he had become her closest confidant and friend, visiting her daily when his duties at Carson Ranch allowed. Not to them, not to anyone. Jake glanced at her, surprise evident in his expression. "What will you do with the land then? You can't farm it alone." "No," she agreed, "but I've been thinking the house and barn can be rebuilt. The fields are still there, ready for planting." She took a deep breath. "I'm going to hire help. Use what money my parents had saved to start again." Jake stopped walking, turning to face her. "Zara, that's a tremendous undertaking for anyone, let alone a woman on her own. The West isn't kind to solitary women." "I know," she acknowledged, "but this is my home now. My parents believed in that land. I can't just abandon it." Admiration flickered in Jake's eyes, along with something deeper that made her heart skip. "You're a remarkable woman, Zara Valenti," she smiled, warmed by his words. "I've had remarkable friends to help me through this time. Especially you, Jake." Their gazes held for a long moment, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. Since the night he had found her, their relationship had evolved from rescuer and victim to true friends, with the promise of something more hovering just beyond reach. Zara found herself drawn to his quiet strength, his unwavering integrity. and the gentle way he treated her never as a helpless female, but as an equal partner in conversation and decision-making. The spell was broken by the town clock chiming the hour. Jake reluctantly stepped back. "I should get you back to the miller's. It's getting late." As they turned toward the sheriff's house, Jake cleared his throat. "I've been meaning to ask. Mr. Carson gave me leave to take a few days. I was thinking of riding out to your homestead tomorrow to assess what would be needed for rebuilding. Would you like to come with me?" Zara hadn't returned to the homestead since the day they had salvaged what little remained. The thought of seeing it again filled her with apprehension, yet she knew she must face it if she truly intended to reclaim her parents' legacy. "Yes," she said softly, "I'd like that." The following morning dawned clear and bright, a perfect Colorado spring day. Jake arrived at the miller's home early, leading a gentle mare for Zara. Mrs. Miller packed them a hearty lunch, her motherly concern evident in the generous portions. "You make sure she doesn't overdo it," she instructed Jake. "The poor child's been through enough." "I'll take good care of her, madam," Jake promised, his eyes meeting Zara's with a warmth that made her cheeks flush. The ride to the homestead was filled with companionable conversation. Jake shared stories of his childhood in Kansas, of his dreams for his own ranch someday, and of the lessons Robert Carson had taught him about cattle ranching. Zara found herself laughing for the first time since the tragedy, the weight of grief momentarily lifted by Jake's easy company. When they crested the hill overlooking the homestead, Zara steeled herself for the sight of the ruins. What she hadn't expected was the activity below. A small group of men were clearing debris from the burned-out structure, while others were unloading lumber from wagons. "Jake?" she questioned, puzzled. "What's happening?" A smile spread across his face. "I might have mentioned your plans to Mr. Carson, and he might have mentioned them to a few others in town. Seems folks wanted to help." Overwhelmed, Zara urged her horse forward. As they approached, she recognized many of the workers: the blacksmith, the carpenter, several cowboys from Carson Ranch, and even Sheriff Miller himself, shirt sleeves rolled up as he helped move charred timber. "Miss Valenti," the sheriff called, tipping his hat. "Hope you don't mind us getting started. Thought you might appreciate a head start on rebuilding." Tears welled in Zara's eyes as she dismounted. "I don't know what to say. Thank you, all of you." The men nodded, uncomfortable with her emotion but pleased by her gratitude. They returned to work as Jake led Zara around the property, pointing out their progress. "The foundation is still solid," he explained, "and they've salvaged some of the lower wall timbers. With the lumber they've brought, we can have the frame up within a week." "We?" Zara questioned, noticing his use of the pronoun. Jake looked suddenly uncertain. "I mean, if you'd like my help. Mr. Carson's given me leave to assist with the rebuilding." "I'd like that very much," she assured him, touched by his offer. They spent the day at the homestead, with Zara gaining a new appreciation for the generosity of her neighbors. By sunset, the ruins had been cleared away, and the outline of the new house was beginning to take shape. The men departed, promising to return the following day. As twilight descended, Zara and Jake found themselves alone by the newly laid foundation. The transformation of the site from a place of death and destruction to one of renewal and hope left Zara feeling both exhausted and exhilarated. "I can't believe how much they accomplished in one day," she marveled. "At this rate, I might have a home again by summer." Jake nodded, his expression thoughtful as he gazed out over the land. The setting sun bathed everything in golden light, transforming the ordinary landscape into something magical. "It's beautiful here," he said quietly. "I can see why your parents chose this spot." "It is," Zara agreed, following his gaze to where the foothills rose in the distance, purple against the darkening sky. I never fully appreciated it until now. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, shoulder to shoulder, watching as the first stars appeared overhead. Zara was acutely aware of Jake's presence beside her, the subtle scent of leather and soap, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the warmth radiating from his tall frame. "Zara," he began, his voice low and serious, "there's something I've been wanting to talk to you about." She turned to face him, her heart suddenly racing. "Yes." Jake removed his hat, running a hand through his hair in a gesture she had come to recognize as nervousness. "I've been thinking about your situation, about your plan to restart the farm." "And," she prompted when he hesitated. "And I think you're right to want to honor your parents' dream, but I also think Jake Ryder was right when he said it's too much for one person to manage alone." Zara smiled at his slip into third person. "I won't be alone. I'll hire help." "Hired hands come and go," Jake pointed out. "What you need is a partner, someone with a stake in the success of the place." Zara's breath caught as she began to understand the direction of his words. "What exactly are you suggesting, Jake?" He took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders as if preparing for battle. "I'm suggesting a partnership. I have savings, not much, but enough to contribute to the rebuilding. I know farming and ranching. I'm strong and healthy and willing to work from sunrise to sunset." "A business partnership?" Zara asked, needing clarification though her heart already knew the answer. Jake's eyes met hers, earnest and vulnerable. "Not just business, Zara. I know it's soon, we've only known each other a few weeks, but I feel like I've known you forever." He took her hands in his. "From the moment I found you that night, something changed in me. I can't explain it, but I know it's real." Zara's heart pounded against her ribs. "Jake, I'm not asking for an immediate answer," he rushed on. "Just think about it. Consider the possibility of us building something together, not just a farm, but a life." The sincerity in his eyes took her breath away. In the weeks since the tragedy, Jake had been her rock, her comfort, her friend. She had grown to depend on his steady presence, to look forward to his visits, to feel most herself when she was with him. Was that love? She wasn't certain, but she knew it was the foundation upon which love could grow. "I will think about it," she promised. "Truly." Relief washed over his features. He raised her hands to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles that sent a tremor of awareness through her body. "That's all I ask," he said softly. As they rode back to town in the gathering darkness, Zara's mind whirled with possibilities. Jake's proposal had been unexpected, yet somehow perfectly timed, an offer of partnership, when she most needed to believe in the future. She found herself imagining what life might be like with him by her side, working the land together, building a home and perhaps someday a family. The thought brought not fear but a warm glow of anticipation. Perhaps this was what her mother had meant when she spoke of finding the right partner, someone whose presence made you stronger, braver, more truly yourself. By the time they reached the miller's home, Zara had made her decision. "Jake," she said as he helped her dismount, "about your proposal." He held his breath, his eyes searching hers in the moonlight. "Yes," she said simply. "My answer is yes." Joy transformed his face, erasing the lines of worry and fatigue. "Zara, are you sure? I don't want you to feel rushed," or she silenced him by placing her fingers gently against his lips. "I'm sure. We'll build it together, the farm, the future, everything." With reverent slowness, Jake leaned down and replaced her fingers with his lips, sealing their agreement with a kiss that was both tender promise and passionate declaration. Zara melted into his embrace, feeling for the first time since the tragedy that perhaps happiness was not lost to her forever. When they finally parted, both breathless, Jake rested his forehead against hers. "I promise you won't regret this. I'll spend every day making sure of it." Zara smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. I know. The news of their engagement spread quickly through Colfax, met with widespread approval. Mrs. Miller cried happy tears, declaring it the most romantic thing she'd ever witnessed. Robert Carson clapped Jake on the shoulder and offered him a substantial wedding gift, 10 head of cattle to start their own herd. The rebuilding of the homestead took on new meaning as Jake and Zara worked side by side, planning not just for the immediate need of shelter, but for their shared future. The house that emerged from the ashes was larger than the original, with extra bedrooms for the family they hoped to have someday. On a perfect June day, 6 weeks after Jake's proposal, they were married in a simple ceremony on their newly completed front porch. Zara wore a cream-colored dress that Mrs. Carson had helped her make, with wildflowers in her hair. Jake, scrubbed and nervous in his best shirt, watched with wonder as she walked toward him on Robert Carson's arm. The entire town of Colfax turned out for the celebration that followed a proper frontier wedding feast with music, dancing, and enough food to feed an army. As dusk fell, lanterns were lit around the yard, casting a warm glow over the gathering. "Happy?" Jake asked as they shared their first dance as husband and wife. Zara looked around at the homestead reborn, at the smiling faces of their friends and neighbors, and finally at the man who had saved her in more ways than one. "More than I ever thought possible again," she answered truthfully. Later, as their guests departed with well wishes and knowing smiles, Jake swept Zara into his arms and carried her across the threshold of their new home, a symbol of their triumph over tragedy, of life continuing despite loss, of love blooming from the ashes of despair. "Welcome home, Mrs. Ryder," he whispered against her lips. "I am home," she replied, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Wherever you are, that's my home now." In the years that followed, the Ryder homestead flourished. Jake's knowledge of cattle ranching combined with Zara's determined spirit transformed the property into one of the most successful small ranches in the county. They added a stone barn, expanded their herds, and planted orchards that would someday provide shade for their children's children. The Rocky Mountain Silver and Copper Company made one final attempt to purchase their land, offering a fortune that would have made them wealthy beyond imagination. Jake and Zara declined without hesitation. "Some things aren't for sale," Jake told the company representative. "This land is our legacy now." Their first child, a son they named Edward Jacob, after both their fathers arrived on a snowy December night 2 years after their wedding. Zara, exhausted but radiant after a difficult labor, watched as Jake cradled their newborn with hands that could break a wild horse, yet held their son with infinite tenderness. "He's perfect," Jake whispered, awe in his voice. "Just like his mother." As their family grew to include 2 more sons and a daughter with Zara's dark eyes and stubborn chin, the horror of that fiery night receded into memory, never forgotten, but no longer defining. Their children grew up hearing stories of their brave grandparents who had carved a homestead from wilderness, and of the night a cowboy had wrapped their mother in his coat, saving not just her life but her faith in the possibility of happiness. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jake presented Zara with a special gift, a new duster coat, custom made by the finest tailor in Denver. "To replace the one you stole," he teased, eyes twinkling. Zara laughed, touching the worn sleeve of his original coat, which still hung by their door despite its age and weathering. "I never stole it, you gave it to me. And I'd give it again," Jake said, suddenly serious. "Everything I am, everything I have, it's yours, Zara." It has been since that night. As they stood on their porch watching the sunset paint the Colorado sky in brilliant hues of gold and crimson, Zara leaned against her husband's solid strength, grateful beyond words for the life they had built together from tragedy's ashes. "I love you, Jake Ryder," she said softly. "Thank you for finding me that night." He pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I'll always find you, Zara, in this life and whatever comes after." And in that moment, with the land they loved spread before them and the family they had created safe within their home, Zara knew with absolute certainty that from the darkest night could come the brightest dawn, that sometimes, when all seemed lost, a stranger's coat could become the first chapter of the greatest love story ever written.